This video contains or may contain spoilers for Hollow Knight. In Hollow Knight, the Godseekers are looking to connect with Hallownest's most powerful beings in order to ascend their minds to be on the same level as these beings. On the surface, it seems that these entities, which they call gods, are simply the many bosses from the game. But what are they really searching for? Is it only strong fighters, or actual higher beings and creatures that have a connection to them? I'll be explaining my speculations in this video. Many of the bosses, or gods, encountered in Godhome are infected, about half to be precise, so that gives them a connection with the Radiance and strength in combat through her. These bosses are the Vengefly King, Gruzmother, Flukemarm, Oblobbles, Brooding Malek, Soul Warrior, Massive Moss Charger, Umu, False Knight / Failed Champion, Broken Vessel / Lost Kin, Nosk, Soul Master / Soul Tyrant, Watcher Knights, God Tamer, Traitor Lord, Crystal Guardian / Enraged Guardian, and Hive Knight. A couple of special cases here are the Massive Moss Charger and Broken Vessel / Lost Kin, because they also have connections with other higher beings in addition to the Radiance through infection. The bugs who make up the Massive Moss Charger are part of the Mosskin, who were created by Un. So if you've ever wondered why this of all things is in Godhome, that's why. The Broken Vessel / Lost Kin is the offspring of the Pale King and White Lady, giving them a connection to a total of 3 higher beings. The other half of the bosses are not infected, but some do have connections with other higher beings or powerful forces. The Collector, for example, is a being of void, which is known to be a powerful entity. Grim is connected to the Nightmare's heart. Hornet is a daughter of the Pale King. And the Pure Vessel is not only a child of the Pale King and White Lady, but a being with the power of void, as well as literally containing the Radiance herself inside of them, although in this form not infected and controlled by her power. In Godhome, the Pure Vessel's strength is all their own. Several more bosses are Warrior Dreams: Zero, Markoth, No Eyes, Gorb, Marmu, Galeon, and Elder Hu. There's also Grey Prince Zote, who was conjured by a powerful dream. These bugs in their spirit forms are not infected, but being made from dreams, they possess the power of essence. We know that essence originates from the dream realm, as does the Radiance, and that the Radiance herself is made from a light similar in nature to essence. Perhaps through the power of these bugs, the Godseekers are therefore brought closer to attuning the Radiance. With the rest of the uninfected bosses, there isn't as obvious or direct of a connection with any higher being. The Dung Defender / White Defender spent much time in the company of the Pale King and White Lady, so maybe that somehow registers to the Godseekers when they attune him. That leaves the Mantis Lords / Sisters of Battle, Brothers Oro and Mato, Paintmaster Shio, and Great Nail Sage Sly. For the Mantises, perhaps their high intellect, which was strong enough to make them immune to the infection, registers on a similar level of power as connections with a higher being. For all the bosses connected to the nail arts, these arts could have originated with a higher being, or their power attained through concentrating energy on a nail in order to perform them also registers with the Godseekers as if it were involved with a higher being. We can see in the fifth pantheon that the Godseeker's true desire is to connect with actual higher beings. Throughout the pantheon, the Godseeker can be encountered in rooms pertaining to Un, the White Lady, and the Pale King. She is unable to attune these beings the way she wants to, since Un's power has faded, the White Lady deliberately evades attunement, and the Pale King is just straight up dead, even though his afterglow still lingers in Hallownest. That basically just leaves the Radiance, but she is similarly inaccessible due to being sealed away. However, the Godseekers are able to sense her power even through these seals, and she is the one who they are ultimately trying to bring about, since she is at the top of the fifth and final pantheon in her absolute form. So the Godseekers want to attune the power of certain beings who they believe will lead them higher and higher until they can reach the Radiance, whose attunement is their final goal. Whether they realize that the reason she is so prevalent in the kingdom despite being sealed away is the infection, we can't be sure, and it may even be possible that the Godseekers are aware of the infection, but don't care about the devastation it has caused. In fact, the infection may be how they were able to sense the Radiance's power through the seals anyway. There are a couple of mysteries surrounding the Godseekers' methods, though. For example, if the pure vessel is in their greatest form in Godhome, therefore being uninfected, why isn't the same true of the broken vessel / lost kin, themselves also being a vessel? This could just mean that being infected made the broken vessel / lost kin stronger than they ever were before they were infected and reanimated, but the pure vessel was stronger before they were infected because, according to the hunter's journal entry, they were raised and trained to prime form. Additionally, the Knight also has a direct connection to the Pale King and White Lady as well as the Void, so why doesn't the Godseeker recognize them as a god at first? It's possible that when her process of seeking out and tuning the powerful beings of Hallownest began, and possibly when it ended as well, the Knight had not yet returned to Hallownest, and so their power was left undetected. Ironically, in Godseeker mode, she does recognize the Knight as the God of Gods for supposedly having defeated each of the gods, even though in this mode, the Knight starts out in Godhome and is unable to leave in order to fight these bosses in Hallownest. Perhaps in that particular reality, the Knight has already done it before the game begins, the Godseeker knows this, and she just wants to see the Knight do it again. The gameplay mechanic for encountering bosses in Godhome is that the Knight has to have fought them in Hallownest beforehand, but this may not be required for a boss to have its place in Godhome at all, only for the Knight to access their place there. This connection is made through the God Tuner, which the Knight acquires when the device falls out of the sarcophagus that the Godseeker was contained in. The God Tuner seems to know which beings are the powerful ones that the Godseekers are looking for. It just needs to actually encounter those beings through the Knight defeating them in combat. Since the Knight now owns the God Tuner, in order for the Knight to open up a connection to them in Godhome. But that raises more questions. If the Knight has to defeat and therefore in most cases kill a boss before they can challenge it in Godhome, then how does that now dead boss reappear as if they were alive in Godhome? In the case of the warrior dreams, they have disappeared and their essence has been absorbed by the dream nail, so how did they show up again in Godhome? As for the characters who are still alive, namely Hornet, Oro, Mato, Shio, Ogrim, Sly, and the Hollow Knight, do they just immediately fall asleep in the real world in order to manifest in Godhome? Hornet's dream nail dialogue even suggests that she is aware of the fact that she is in a dream. I think I may actually know a way for all of this to make sense, with some evidence to prove it. If the knight defeats absolute radiance in the Hall of Gods as opposed to the Pantheon of Hallownest, the Godseeker reveals that what the knight has just fought is a mere imprint of the radiance. That implies that in the Hall of Gods, at least, the bosses that appear are just sort of holograms. This does make sense, because when the knight defeats a boss, the God Tuner sort of records that boss's power. Once in Godhome, the God Tuner may use the power it's captured to recreate a virtual version of that boss to be fought. That's likely also the case for the bosses as they're fought in the Pantheons. It could also apply to the knight themselves in Godseeker mode specifically. There is an exception to this rule, however, and that is the absolute radiance. The Godmaster endings reveal that the Shade Lord did actually kill the actual Radiance, not just a projection of her, as the void that it's made of is able to exit Godhome and enter the physical realm, if the delicate flower doesn't interrupt the process, that is. The infection is also shown visibly disappearing from inside the Black Egg Temple. Even with most of the bosses fought just being projections, the Godseekers' method still remains the same. They search through imprints of power that they have attuned in order to ultimately find the Radiance. Speaking of which, there's a reason why the Radiance is absolute in Godhome, whereas she isn't when fought in the Hollow Knight's dream, besides the general fact that Godhome allows beings to be at their highest potential power. When the Radiance is fought inside the Hollow Knight's mind, accessed by dream nailing the Hollow Knight during their fight, she is still limited by being sealed inside the Hollow Knight. At this point, of course, the Dreamer's seals have been broken and the infection has significantly leaked out of the Hollow Knight, but the Radiance is still trapped inside them while they're still alive. When the pure vessel is defeated in the Pantheon of Hallownest and the constraints on the Radiance therefore removed, only then can she be at her full power without anything holding her back. In other words, absolute radiance is as powerful as she normally is without being sealed. No wonder the Pale King was so desperate to restrain her. I mean, can you imagine having to fight Absrad just to get the Dream No More ending? Anyway, my conclusion is that the Godseekers are ultimately looking for actual higher beings whose power they are able to detect through lesser beings who either share their power or have a similar power on their own. But what do you think? How do you believe the Godseekers' attunement works? Is there any aspect of it that I missed? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. Please give it a like if you found it interesting, and share it with someone else who might feel the same. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.